happening, everyone? Hey, this is another episode of the Adventure Box podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you about this. This is Egypt. We're talking about Egypt this Thursday. It's great. I love Egypt. It is mysterious. It is well beyond any other civilization that's out there, minus like one or two. This again, to my thinking, because Egypt has basically stayed itself for this long, and yet has had so many times been taken over by all different types of people. Whether, like we talked about on Tuesday, we had the Hyksos who took over Lower Egypt, who were possibly the Egyptians or the what would become Israelites, and then, or if it was the Greeks, the Romans, the Persians, the there you go. One of those times when it wasn't the Mesopotamians. It was a group from Mesopotamia. So you've got all these different people that come in and take over this land, and yet it still stays solid. It still keeps it to itself. Now, today we're going to be talking about another invasion, but this is not an invasion into Egypt. This is an invasion out of Egypt. So now, on Tuesday, we talked about two people that were very important to this time period. That was Ahmos. Sorry, there's Kamos, and there was Ahmos. Kamos was the one that continued the pressures going up into Lower Egypt to kick out the Hyksos. But you also had the Ahmos, who was the one that basically reestablished Egypt. So, stay with me. You have this family, which is basically the start of the 18th dynasty, who basically takes over Egypt again. It unifies the lower region and the upper region. It becomes one again. Well, here's the thing. What happens when a person decides, hey, I'm really strong and I can do a lot of things with our power? Why are we stopping at just retaking what we already had? Let's expand a little bit. Let's get out there and take over some more places. So they go to the west and more into Libya in that area. So the Egyptians push into there, but only really set up an influence. They don't take it over completely. But then they go east and they go into what is now like upper Saudi Arabia, more of Israel, Gaza, those type, and going all the way up into Syria. Now they don't just just put an influence there. No, they take over that area. That is theirs, full control over all the land, and that's all the way up past the Red Sea and into Israel, into what would become Israel, and up into Syria. So you have the Egyptians who have now taken over this area. Now, remember, this is around, the New Kingdom is around 1550 to 1070. But Ahmos was actually in power between 1549 and 1524 BC. So he came in and he started to extend into those areas. Now, he didn't just expand east and north. No. He actually went south as well. So their trading partner was actually Nubia. And they had a fairly good relationship with distinct borders. And everything was fine between them. But Ahmos was not accepting of that. He was not just for taking a portion. No, he wanted it all. But Ahmos never saw that point. He only took over part of it. It was Thutmose the first who extended Egypt's control deep into upper Nubia, reaching as far as the fourth cataract, which I actually don't know what the cataract is. It's in here, but I have not actually looked that up. What is the fourth cataract? Let's look that up. How far south did they go? What is the fourth cataract? Because I copied and pasted that. So the fourth cataract is a section of the Nile River located in northern Sudan where the rivers flow is interrupted by a series of rapids and rock obstacles. The cataract of the Nile are shallow, rocky sections that provide natural barriers to navigation. You can't sail boats up it. So that's really interesting. So he goes down and he takes over all of this area. Basically, he's trying to take over all the Nile area. Now, he doesn't actually get to see all of it taken over, but Thutmose III comes in and does the same thing. Now, interesting enough, it doesn't actually mention Thutmose II. So I'm guessing Thutmose II would have had some influence because Thutmose I ended his reign in 1493 BC. Thutmose III, 1479 BC. So there's a gap of about about 14 years. So 14 years. Thutmose II probably went and did the same thing. But Thutmose III is given the credit for continuing the campaign into Nubia and considering Egypt's dominance all of Nubia. Now, they actually go down into Ethiopia as well. And this is actually where they start to fall apart. It's like a downfall of this area, is when they go into this area. The civilization was actually called Punt, but it's basically where Ethiopia is, between 1490 BC to 1100 BC. So somewhere in that point is when the whole thing starts to collapse. And this is a strong influence, but not it's called a vassal state, but it's not a land that's completely taken over. And that's, again, all the main civilizations south of Egypt was taken over by these Mose brothers. We'll just call them the Mose brothers. You have Ahmose, Thutmose I, Thutmose II, Thutmose III, the Mose brothers. Mose brothers. Okay, so during this time, you have much of the known world taken over by this and or influence of Egypt in all these different areas. So this is quite interesting because you have a land that worked with Egypt, a country that's actually called Kerma, which was in Nubia, and it's completely taken over. And so one thing to know about the Nubians, is the Nubians actually had a very strong understanding. They had a very strong presence. They had a very strong polytheistic religion as well. And so, yes, there were some things that were merged in, but they really kept to themselves and they kept their independence in their hearts for a time. Now, when the next intermediate period happens is when it starts falling apart. But next week, we're actually going to go through Thutmose I all the way to the rise of Kush, which is the kingdom that comes out of Nubia to take over Egypt. But I'm not going to go that far. I won't tell you that much. But we're going to go through some famous pharaohs at the time. Most of them, interesting enough, were actually controlled by their mothers before the pharaoh became old enough to take over. It's quite interesting. We're going over all this. But do your own research into finding out some of the things about these civilizations. You got ancient Egypt in the New Kingdom, so find out some of the cultures there, and some of it's in your curriculum. But also the Nubians cultures there too. There's actually some stories, fictional stories, as if it was real. It actually tells you that. There's some broadcasts of what would have been radio broadcast if radios had actually been there during that time. So there's a lot of different things that we bring in just so you can actually understand the relationship that happens between the Egyptians and the Nubians. So let me show you some of the things. The Nubians, remember, are the ones that created these type of pyramids, not like the Egyptian pyramids, which are a lot more wider than these ones. These ones have a lot faster incline. I think it was also because it was easier to build than the Egyptians. At a slow incline, it's hard to get up on top of it and to build. These ones, if you see, the pyramids actually had entrances as well that were built like this. And supposedly, some of the influence of both countries were actually felt between both countries when it came to developing their pyramids. And this is just another map. You have Lower Nubia, which, interesting enough, is just like the Egyptians. The lower Egypt is actually the northern area, and Upper Egypt is the southern area. Nubia, Lower Nubia, which is lower because the river runs down it, which makes sense now. I thought it was north and south, but this is actually upper is literally the elevation of that area. So Upper Nubia was actually near the top of the Nile, where the water ran out and ran down the rivers and out towards the ocean. It's very fascinating how that all came up. The Nubians were African. Now, funny enough, Egyptians were African too, but they were black. So the Egyptians were not all black. They're more of a dark complexion of brown, Middle Eastern in that sense. But the Nubians were black. And so you can actually see a lot of the Egyptian and the Egyptian culture in Nubia with their writings and such. And you can also see later on, you're going to see where the Nubians take over and you have the black pharaohs. Again, these are all fascinating things that I never really knew about until a few years ago, maybe. I never learned this in school. You would never learn this in school. Actually, these days, you wouldn't learn about history in school. They don't teach it that much. They teach social studies and whatever they want to teach when it comes to social studies, such as democracy, which is great. You need to know that. But where did democracy come from? Why is it so important? And how do we know that democracy is such a great thing? Well, history will teach you that. But if you don't teach history, you won't know where that comes from and why. Socialism. Is socialism great? Well, some people in the schools that's close to me, I found out actually think that it is great, and how the youth actually think, well, we could do it great. We could make it work. Well, if you see history, you'll see that no socialistic society has ever worked. You have dictators, you have fascists, you have people that take over those areas because of what is tried to be a great thing turns into a horrible thing for everyone. And those that have the drive to do things that are great, such as if I was starting historical conquest, if I was in a socialistic society where I don't get to, I can put out my stuff, but I don't get to make money off it. So I have to share that. I have to be controlled by the government when it comes to that. Heck freaking no. I wouldn't do it. No way. Historical conquest would not be developed in a socialistic society. So the same thing goes here. So you have history being taught, cultures being established, and we're going to be talking to you about all these different things. So, that being said, if you guys have any questions, please let me know. I want to be able to answer these questions and share them with you. Now, let me go in a little bit more into Nubia. We're not done with the class. I was just saying that this is basically where we're at. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of the understanding of the new kingdom at this point. So, Hyksos has united Egypt. Yay! They're united! Expelled the Hyksos invaders, which actually means foreign invaders. Hyksos means foreign invaders. Yay! Celebration to them. What most likely happened when they expelled the Hyksos? Did they push them all out, or did they take slaves? Well, according to their culture, they took slaves. Okay, so now we have slaves in the... Boo! Then what happens? Well, you have Thutmose the First, who expands Egyptian influence into Nubia down south and Levant up north. Then you have, now this is where it changes. The Most brothers are gone. Now you have Hatshepsut, a powerful female power that comes in. And I'm not going to tell you too much about her because her son is Thutmose III. That's what it was. See, I knew there was something. It wasn't Thutmose II. No, Thutmose II actually does come in. Thutmose II comes in. He's not in power. if I remember correctly, he's not in power because he dies before taking the throne, which is why Thutmose III, his brother, takes over. But he's too young to take over, which is why Hatshepsut comes in. The mother, the female pharaoh, comes in. The first female pharaoh, I think. There wasn't anyone before that. But what's great about her, is that she actually makes the Egypt to flourish during this time. And she's not the one that wants to do a lot of military expansion. But when Thutmose III comes in, finds out about the military expansion, of course, he jumps in and takes over. So, but this is something to know. At this point, there is a rise in Egypt. There is a change in Egypt. Polytheism. It's not going to be the same in a few years. Female pharaohs. Now, that's not something new. If you know ancient Egypt, you'll know that it's not a patriarchal society. It is a partnership society. It is a patriarch and a matriarch working together to actually come together. So when it is a pharaoh making a decision, yes, he makes most of the decision. It's the wife that he counsels with. You'll actually find out that a lot of the female influences that are in Egypt are the spiritual leaders. They become the spiritual leaders of this. And you're going to see it a lot in this new kingdom. This new kingdom is like the millennials of this day. So they come into power and they want to change the world. Well, during that time, things happen. Traditions change. Not always for the better. Sometimes for the better. There's just so much to tell you about coming up in next episode. So this Thursday. So sorry this one was short. There's just a lot of things I wanted to hold off until next week. And there's a lot in your curriculum. I want you to go over that. Read up on this stuff because it is fascinating. How did a female pharaoh come into power? How did Thutmose take over more of Nubia? What happened to Nubia during that time? Was there a benefit or was it a controversy? You're going to read all that in the book. But because it overlaps with what we're going to be talking about next week, not next week, next time we meet, Thursday, I don't want to go too much into that. I want you to be able to read about it as you go, and we'll fill in the gaps when we get there. So thank you so much for joining us on this Adventure Box podcast, and we will catch you next time. Take care and have a great day. Bye-bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.